All right, so today we're talking about 5 tips that I have learned from 48 plus years of researching, both personally and as a professional. So here's the deal. This presentation is created or was created for my 400th episode celebration on the Genealogy TV YouTube channel. So if you haven't seen that channel, go check it out. Make sure you subscribe. We're getting closer to 100,000 subscribers over there. Make sure you subscribe to this one too. Because what we're going to do is we're going to talk about some tips that I have, some of the best tips. And this is like not an intense lesson here. It's just some things that I've learned over the years that I just wanted to make sure that we share everywhere we can, because it really, family history is meant to be fun, and that's what this is all about. So if you have any questions or comments, throw them in the comment section, because this is the recorded version. If you want to watch it live, it'll be on the 18th. So this may go up on the 17th. I don't know, whenever I get it done. So do you have any ancestors in North Carolina? So that's my question. And if so, what county are they in? I'm constantly working in about 50 of the 100 counties in North Carolina. So I'm just curious. That's all. Just curious. Here's an image from Randolph County that is one of the earliest maps of Randolph County. I think it's kind of cool. So that's what we're talking about today, is 5 easy tips based on my experience as a professional genealogist. And so let's get started. You might want to take notes because there's no handout for this. Just saying. Okay, tip number 1 is avoid overwhelm. It's easy to get overwhelmed with family history, especially when you're first getting started. Until you learn how to get focused, it can be a little daunting, especially when you've just inherited boxes of stuff from the family, and now you've got to go through it all and figure it out. And I want to add all this to Ancestry or FamilySearch or MyHeritage or wherever. And so that is tip number 1. So my advice is to work on one ancestor at a time, or maybe an ancestral couple, so that you are just really focused on that one person. Now, it's really easy to get sidetracked, and we'll talk about that. But the trick is to stay organized. So as you're working on that one ancestor, or maybe the ancestral couple, you're organizing your files that you have on hand for that one ancestor. Set the rest of it aside. You can deal with that later when you are working on that ancestor or those other ancestors, right? So keep that one ancestor that you're working on organized. So that will really kind of help you stay focused. And so everything we're doing here with the avoid overwhelm subject is so that when you're working on this one ancestor, you'll also have like one research question, like, when was Grandpa born? And so that research question then becomes your focus, okay? Avoid rabbit holes. Now, here's the deal with rabbit holes. It's really easy to, as you're starting to do your research, go, I found this record, and I found that record. And when you're finding all these records, it's super easy to go chase those records, right? And go, wait a minute. There's Aunt Mabel. I need to grab those records. Well, yeah, at least the URL. So here's what I advise you to do, is take that one ancestor, that rabbit hole ancestor, maybe it's Aunt Mabel, okay? Open up a Word document or Google Docs or whatever rocks your world. Aunt Mabel at the top, put her full name. Put a little tiny description of what this URL you're about to paste in there is about. Maybe it's her birth record or something you've discovered. Paste the URL, and that way when you come back to work on Aunt Mabel's profile, you've got that information there. Then get back to your research question and then you can stay focused and avoid the rabbit hole. So now you're back on your one ancestor and you're focused, okay? Tip number 2 is research notes. Now, this is probably the most important thing I can tell you to do. And research notes, the way I've developed this over the years, I'm not the first to have, talked about research notes, but I've kind of developed the system over the years of really keeping good research notes in chronological order. We'll talk about that in a second. But it is really a game changer, I promise you. So you want to keep one set of research notes per ancestor. And yes, it's a game changer for sure. And make sure that as you're putting stuff in, the reason why we do this is because it really makes you focus on the details. And so a lot of people go, yeah, but I don't want to put all these research, this work, I don't want to do that. Well, here's the deal. If you're stuck on somebody, or I do this for every direct line ancestor, that's just what I do because that's what I do. But I keep a set of research notes on all my direct ancestors. I don't share them online because they're a constantly evolving set of research notes. I'm constantly adding to them. More records are coming online every day, and so I'm constantly adding to them. These notes will eventually end up somewhere in a repository, I don't know, the state archives or something, where people will be able to access it. But a lot of that information I've already attached to my Ancestry account or whatever platform I'm working on where I'm finding these records. And so this stuff can be found, but a lot of this stuff is the abstracted information out of each of those records. So you start in chronological order. Let me advance to the next slide here. We do this in chronological order, the information that you found and any negative evidence. So negative evidence is evidence that is not found only after you've done reasonably exhaustive research. And reasonably exhaustive research is a term that was coined by the Board for Certification of Genealogists, and basically what it means is you've turned over every rock. And you have looked everywhere you possibly can, and you're not finding what you're... So let's say you're looking for Grandpa's birthplace, and you've looked everywhere in this county, and it's not there. That's negative evidence when you have done the reasonably exhaustive research process. And so when you have done that, then you can note it as, I'm not finding him in XYZ County. Let's say it's Martin County, North Carolina. You've not found that ancestor there. So what does that mean? Well, it means that you didn't find anything. It doesn't mean the records don't exist. It just means you didn't find him, but it also might mean that he wasn't in Martin County. He might have been in a neighboring county. So make sure you're looking there. Make sure you're putting sources in your source citation. So this is a little bit closer look at what my research notes for one particular ancestor looks like. If you'll notice, there are source citations at the bottom. Occasionally I put images in there just because it's fun and it's cool. And yeah, so I don't put a full transcription of information. So if I have transcribed a will, for example, I won't put the whole entire transcript in my research notes. It's too much information, because the idea behind research notes is to be able to find things quickly. And so the reason why I start with a date is because if I'm looking for my ancestor in a certain time period, maybe it's between this date and this date, I can jump to that part of the research notes without having to read through all the minutia of everything I've ever done. So what you do is you put the abstracted information. Say you found a will, instead of the whole transcription, you put the abstracted information in there. And so, all right, with that, let's move on to our next slide. Tip number 3 is location, location, location. So it is very important to do location research. We're talking maps, we're talking researching the county in all the platforms that you can, researching at the state level. So know when borders change, because this is important. I have one ancestor who lived in Martin County, North Carolina. I forget what the other county was. They didn't move though, but the borders kept hopping over them. And so sometimes some of the records are in Martin County, sometimes they're in another county. It might have been Edgecombe County. I don't remember. But, know when they were changing. Also know when the county was formed and what county it was formed from. Again, because the records might be in a different county. And also know what the neighboring counties are, because, they might have been close enough to have moved, or their daughter moved with her new husband just down the road, and that happened to be in a different county. So just be mindful of that. Location, location, location. So where do you find this stuff? Card or collections catalogs. And I say that because it's a card catalog on Ancestry. It's a collections catalog on MyHeritage. And also, we'll talk about the FamilySearch wiki here in a second. But you go there and you go straight to the card catalog. Instead of searching from the profile, you can certainly do that, but you'll find more records in the collections or card catalogs than you will from searching from the ancestor's profile. So you go to the card catalog and you drill into the location. So in my case, it might be, United States, and then drop down to North Carolina. And I usually start at the state level first and see what collections that platform has. So Ancestry might have one set of collections. MyHeritage might have a different set of collections. FamilySearch might have even a different set of collections. You can also go to the county libraries, the state archives, college and universities. Now there are 3 that I know of offhand in North Carolina. I think ECU has a library. I think Duke has a library. There are several libraries here in North Carolina at the university level that have collections for genealogists that may be of interest because of the history. And so there's some really good stuff there. And of course, the FamilySearch wiki is probably my first stop. Anytime I'm going to do location research, I go to the FamilySearch wiki. So if you're not familiar, make sure if you're not on FamilySearch, you should be, because it's free. And it is one of the best resources in the world for genealogy records. So once you log in, you go to search, drop down to the research wiki, and drill in by location. So there's a big map that'll pop up, and you just start drilling into the map or into the location fields. And then it'll give you a whole list of types of records and where they are, regardless of whether they're on FamilySearch or not. They could be somewhere else, and it'll give you a hyperlink to where those records are. It is one of the best resources out there. Now, there's some other resources like Cindy's List. Also, MyHeritage has just come out with a wiki as well. So it might be that you want to be looking in those places as well. Tip number 4, strategic research. Okay, so we want to be thinking about, and this go back to number 1, don't be overwhelmed, because when you're thinking about your strategic research, you're starting to create those research notes and you start going, all right, what's missing? Well, what I do right in my research notes, I create my research plan in big, bold, red letters. So if I found, for example, a census record, and there was, in some of the census records, it talks about the value of the real estate they own. There's land records to find. There's deeds to find. There may be transactional records where people are buying and selling this land. And there may be a will, because usually when land is involved, there is a will for this person. So you may want to go look at, North Carolina State Archives has a lot of the wills. You want to go and you want to look for the will. So now in my research notes, I have the census record. I put it in there, and I see, I've abstracted the stuff out of the census records into my research notes. And then I go, okay, there was a value of land. This is why we do research notes. In red letters, right underneath that census record, I'm going to go find the land records, or go find the deeds, go look for the will. I might put the will down toward the end of his life, and I may make a note, hey, found, in the 1900 census, value of land of $2,500, you know, go look for the will. And those wills probably are at the North Carolina State Archives. Okay? And those are online, by the way. Follow the evidence. Let the evidence lead you. Don't allow confirmation bias. So what that is when you have a hypothesis, and I can't even think of an example offhand, but if you have a hypothesis that you think something happened, or maybe there's family lore, so somebody's related to the King of England. They think, you know, we always heard that we were related to the king, or we always heard that whatever. Don't force fit the evidence to fit the hypothesis. We want to try and disprove the hypothesis as much as we try to prove it. So whatever the story is that you're trying to confirm, you also want to make sure that you are working as hard to disprove it. So it might be that you never do come to a conclusion. That's where the language of probabilities would come in. It is likely that so-and-so, or it is possible, or it is undetermined if so-and-so is related to the King of England. You know what I mean? So just be aware of confirmation bias as you start to work through your stuff. So tip number 5 is to learn the research skills. And if you are new to genealogy, there's a lot of research skills you can learn, but again, don't let it be overwhelming. The first thing, you just learn research notes. If nothing else, do that. But start with just one ancestor, okay? No one says you have to do professional level research, but the skills that you learn as a researcher will make you a great researcher. And even though a lot of what I teach are actually professional level research skills, you don't have to become a professional, but you could become a great researcher. And that helps you confirm those connections and make sure that your tree is accurate and you're not barking up the wrong tree. And then only to discover years later after all this research that you go, oh, wait a minute, we're not related to this whole branch? I need to break off that whole branch? Oh my gosh. So if that happens, just break off the branch from your main tree and leave it there, because the research that you probably did in that branch is probably good for somebody else to discover as well, especially if your tree is public, okay? So learn the research skills. These are the skills. Organizational skills. Learn how to keep organized. Learn good research questions. And that's pretty simple. That's not too hard. Use things like, you know, if you're a reporter and you're doing an investigative interview with somebody, who, what, where, when, why, and how, you know, the basics of journalism is the foundation for most research questions. So who is it? Where were they? You know, when was the event that you're trying to discover? When was Grandpa born? Okay. And so you want to create those research questions. Always use full names. Grandpa wouldn't work, but use his full name. And, you know, maybe it's when and where. And the how is kind of like more like how can you find it? It doesn't necessarily need to be in your research question. Okay. Evidence evaluation. So this is an important skill. So there's a lot to learn about evidence evaluation. Everything from, is this an original or is this a copy? All the little details in it. Who the informant was on a death record can be very valuable. All of those little details that you start to pull out of records can be clues to other records and other details. Then we want to correlate that evidence. So let's say you have a whole set of census records and you were trying to line them up to make sure that the people, the dates, the places, and everything are lining up. So you want to do that. That is correlation of evidence. And then, of course, research notes. Can't talk about that enough. And research planning. So as you are creating, you're going through the organization process, you're adding this stuff to your research notes, you're starting to discover what is missing. The plan is how you're going to go about finding it. FamilySearch Wiki is probably your first stop. And then, of course, the information that you find along the way, you want to source it somehow. Ideally, it, again, is kind of like the who, what, where, when, why, and how when you are creating research source citations for the documents that you're discovering. So I prefer you don't put a hyperlink in there. I will do both sometimes. I will create a professional source citation, which you don't have to do, but this is me. And then sometimes I will put also in a hyperlink just so I can find it quicker. But hyperlinks die after a while. So I have this thing called the 200-year rule. And the 200-year rule is this. Can someone navigate your research notes 200 years from now without a finding aid? So I have this whole system where you use surnames and names. Everything is kind of similar. The folders, the documents, and everything run under the same surname followed by given name, and then a year sometimes, depending on the documents and stuff. But the source citations will lead you to the records. And those records then get added into your folder system. So it's all part of the organizational system. So kind of to recap today is don't let yourself get overwhelmed. This is supposed to be fun. So focus on one research person at a time, one ancestor at a time. Keep research notes, right? Do location research. Be strategic in your thoughts on what kind of research you want to do instead of just chasing those leafy hints all over the tree. Learn the research skills. My slide went dead. All right, so that's it. That's the whole kit and caboodle. I hope that was helpful. Make sure you give me a thumbs up if you like that, and we'll see you in the next video.